Okay, hello everybody. And before I start, before I introduce myself, I want to say a few things. That there's a lot of amazing talks going on right now. And if you are here now to see hands-on stuff, how to do the prompts, or you want to see a developer, it's not the talk for you. I will be using words like beliefs and feeling. So, I wouldn't mind if anybody just stands out and go to a different room. Okay, so we can hopefully start. So, hi everybody, I'm Krzysztof, and first things that you need to know about me is that I have a business card and custom business card, which can tell you one thing, that I'm not a developer anymore. And this is something that I actually come to realization quite recently, and I was fighting it for quite a while, but I wasn't coding for like last 3 years, I think. And so what I do, I'm working at a company called VirtusLab, and we are a software house, so we are writing software, and my job is actually to run two departments. And that is why I have two sides of the single business card. First one is Scala, so we do, and I try to control the chaos of like multiple commercial projects, applications with CATS effect, Zio, Akka, the stuff, the things that you do mostly. But we also do open source. We try to help Martin and try to develop tools like Metals. And and I'm actually making me sad sometimes ago that I'm not personally involved with that. But I figure out that, leading these things and pushing the ship as a whole brings more value to the community. And the other job and the other side of my brain is focus on developer productivity. Bazel, build tools, monorepos, IDs, this kind of stuff. And you probably will see a lot of influences from let's say, the green side of my brain in this talk. So, developer productivity. I have a question to everybody here. Are you measuring productivity in your company, in your project? Is there like a metrics? If there's like any metrics of productivity, can you raise your hand? So why we are talking about productivity all the time? Why all this fuss is about? Because it's like super hard to measure. I mean, there are research, and the best things that they say is like, you need to measure a lot of stuff, then look at the numbers and try to figure out what works for you. So basically, talking about developer productivity is how I want to call it, like games of measures and bespoke outcomes. Because it's not only how you look at the measures, but for different companies, for different projects, proper productivity means something completely different. For some people, it's like how fast you ship features. For other people, how good the features are. For some others, how happy your customers. For most of us, but we don't look at this that much. It's like how much money our code makes in the end, or how many people are happier. You see, I cannot even give you like a one ultimate goal. So, and the fun thing about these measures is like a lot of those measures, and one of the kind of best performing is based on surveys. So, basically we don't measure how productive we are, but what we think if you are productive, which tells you how hard the problem is. And actually, talking about productivity for me is like sort of self-inflicted pain, because it's really hard to tell anything, as with code, it compiles, it works, like, this is twice faster. So I try to decompose, and I also think, every project that you have is different. So how to build something that, that will cover all of this, that gets me to foundation. So what are the foundations of productivity? And when you go for foundations, what is the universal things that we all should have? And that is rights. I mean, universal human rights is probably the most universal thing that we have or should have here on Earth. I hope that all of you come from the countries where they are there, and it should be there. So let's actually build some kind of experiment together. What if you are about to write, a rights of the developers? What are your rights? What you should fight for? And when I think about this, it's like always what the kind of events or something, or the settings that you want to set in, is like medieval England. And there was this rebellion, and it ends up with like Magna Carta Liberatum. Sorry for my Latin pronunciation, but it's basically that thing that was like sort of conclusion of the huge war, was sort of a foundation for like my home is my castle and everything from that. It was not perfect. Don't get me wrong. Only some people got privileges, but it was a step going forward. And if you are about, let's say that we rebelled as the developers and there is this kind of peace conference and we are negotiating, what would it be? What would we get into that? So I would say we want a proper documentation, your requirements that are clear, feedback that is instant, like we want to focus on the things. And yes, that's all right. That's also what we want. But, you know, it's not something that I can control, and most likely it's not something that you can control, because you are part of bigger organizations and, you know, you can only pick. There is some spots here if you want to sit down. There's also one or here there, so you don't need to stand. That you can control. And so when we picture ourselves in this talk, in this presentation, we are here, that guy in the background. And when I look at this guy, I think he's thinking about how to get trade rights right, or taxations, or education, or something that is not, you know, he doesn't have any sword or anything. So yeah, this is where I see myself. And we will talk about developer tooling and developer like working, the things that we have within the grasp of, let's say, PR, or something that we at least should control or have an influence. Not, you know, some of you probably work with business, or some of you probably are business owners even. So you probably control everything, but most of us aren't. So yeah, let's focus on that. And if there is a first thing that we want to put in there, for how many of you, I assume you are programming with Scala, compilation speed is a problem? Please raise your hand. I mean, to be honest, now I want to get everybody that was working for the Scala tooling for last 10 years, because if I ask the same questions, like, you know, Scala Days 2019 in the very same room, I would let half of the room full of hands. And this, for me, is like so important, because it showed me how much things changed, even though people were saying like, no, it's not possible to compile Scala fast. It is. But it's actually important, but not to compile, but actually to get fast feedback. So the first thing that we should put as our like fundamental right as a developer is to be able to have a fast feedback loops. And what does it mean? So if you're running tests, your test should finish within that, you know, short period of time. If you're testing your application to start, it's different for everybody. And what is the kind of number that we are looking for? What is the number that you want to have? Minute? Zero. -1. Yeah, but 3 years ago, I would say 10, 20 seconds is good enough. But now, I would say you should aim for a second, or maybe 2, but at best go beyond second. And why is that? Because for you, as a human, it's not a big deal. You can wait 5 seconds. But if you are working with machines that can iterate much faster on the feedback, I mean, some kind of agent, 10 seconds is quite a lot of time. And it's much worse usually. It needs to iterate much more often. So compilation times, or running your test, whatever, means contribute much more to how fast it solves problems. So let it be decreed that the cycle of development shall... I will not do this. So yeah, basically the first thing is that development loop should take seconds in most of the cases. Because sometimes you need to do a longer compilation or whatever. But in most of the cases, it should be like seconds or below seconds. And then the second thing, the developer environments. Do you like your chairs in your office? I'm not talking about that. So basically, I'm talking about all the toolings that you have around you. And they should be there. You should have access to ID and everything like that. But I don't want to say that this is the right. So for me, the right should be that those things should be easy to set up, and they need to be trustworthy. Let me give you sort of story of my life when I was still dealing with tooling. Firsthand is that we have set like when we was like developing integration for big Scala monorepo, and there was a lot of problems with precision, mainly in ID. I don't want to name any ID, but yeah. And when we were like looking at the problems, like from our experience, it was like we're over-reported compared to what we were observing as a tooling team. And what we figure out is that most of the people, most of the devs, start blaming their own problems on the tool. They do not trust the errors they got from the tool. And this leads to actually from something that was marginal to something that was a huge problem for the whole team. Or let's say, if we put something that takes 50 seconds and we just improve it, but we do not update the way how we report the progress, everybody believe it was too long and they go to grab a coffee, even though it was like 50 seconds rather than 5 minutes. You know what was the solution? We just add random things that pop up in the progress, and that keeps people motivated to stay. So if they do not trust the tools that will be fast, it's not, they are not efficient and they're not productive. And then there's the CI. Of course, it should be fast, it should scale, it should bring value. That's important. But what is even more important, that the value that developers see, understand the value that CI brings. Because if you have a CI that, let's say, tests something that is important only from one person, everybody would hate that. And everybody would blame a lot of things on it. So yeah, CI should be fast. And I will make some references to AI because I promise I will do about AI. And this is something I still don't have a proof. But what I think is that the last word, scale, will need to be much more important in the CI, because if even the half of the things that are promised to us in terms of how productive we will be next year will be true, then we'll be shipping tons of code every day. And something needs to build and run all these tests that might be generated by LLMs that are super easy to do. So yeah, moving on, code reviews. How many of you are waited for a code review this week? How many of you actually postponed doing code reviews for some of your peers? Maybe not this week, in the last 2 weeks. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, doing code reviews is a bit tedious sometimes. So maybe you will be able to help to solve this with, right tools, right models. And also there is a quality of code review, what you are asking for, what are the points what are the things that you point your peers to fix. I will get to that later in the latter part of my presentation. But I think the most annoying part if it takes ages. And imagine what will happen when we ship feature twice as fast. It would be like a bottleneck, and if we don't have procedures, a culture, whatever works in organization, to be organized around code reviews, it's just a matter of time before you get to the spot that code reviews is the biggest bottleneck in developer process. Let's say that capture calculus will be so amazing that we will be able to fly, and but still somebody will need to review that. So we will develop something with 3 days, it will be super safe, but it will take us 2 weeks to review that. So yeah, that is why code reviews as a sort of, I think the last track is chapter 4. So fourth, almost second to last, is the code reviews should be on time, and yeah, it should be reasonable. And the last thing that might be a surprise to you is ownership and support. And that's something that you will hate to do. I hated to do when I was forced to do it. And do I mean that we need to support our users? Yes, you need to do this, but you don't have users, you may write open source, I'm not talking about this kind of support. I'm talking about, I'm pretty sure that all of you collaborate with somebody else. There's different teams, there are different organizations, somebody is using your code, you are using somebody else's code. And let's say there are boundaries that you cannot force anything. Let's say open source, everything is on the best effort basis. But within the teams, organizations, I cannot imagine a situation that you wait for a week for a response for a different team. Is there anybody that's here that always get a reply for a question from your peers within 2 days? You are lucky, guys. I really want to work with you. But in most organizations, even though everybody tries their best and everybody had good intentions, there are always higher priorities. And there are measures that can be taken to actually address this, but there are drastic measures. I'm talking about, and actually I work in a project like this. And it was kind of a big project. There was multiple cross, the people were using each other tools, and it was hard problems that were solved there. And I was the unfortunate because I was doing the developer tooling. So we were blamed for pretty much everything. And also, there's this policy about support was introduced only to the team, and we were interfering with other teams outside of this. So it was double pain for us because we not only need to help others, but there was nobody that we can sort of, I have the questions, I skip my part and I move it further down. This is how insurance works. Like there's not a single company that insures you fully. Everybody is taking bits of the risk and moving it further down the stream. But it's super important because then people were leaving that team, even though they hated this project, they go to the new one and they realize, wait, who is supporting me? Where I should go with my questions? And because what they did to actually fix that, it was said that every team in that organization needs to have a support rota put in the way just for the developers, like developer support rota, that there's always somebody for who like replying to such questions and helping other is higher priority than anything else. The only thing that got higher priority was production outage. No matter what kind of important things that you need to do, if you're on the support rota, you need to reply to the others first. It's a really good principle, but it is hard to implement. I mean, whoever is managing a team, could you put yourself when you're announcing, let's say, Monday morning to your team, hey guys, we need to make a rota, and every one of you will answer questions to the others. But believe me, it pays off, and it pays off now. And when we get to the point when a lot of simple tasks will be like super fast, we'll be stuck on the big problems pretty much every day. And without this kind of efficient communication across the team, no LLMs, no artificial intelligence, at least up to this level that we have now, can help us with hard problems. So efficient communication and sharing the knowledge and being able to unblock others will be even more important than now. So the last and one of the most important thing for me is that each developer should know how and where to look for help for each part of the system they are building. And yeah, this leaves us to sort of the five things that I wanted to give you, like this kind of foundations around productivity. Is it related to Scala? I hope. But I promised productivity, so, and I was thinking maybe I should do like, how to do prompts with LLMs, but I figured out, no, I'm not doing this. I don't want to lie to you. And like just before me, like the other room, there was an amazing presentation about LLMs and what models can do. And this, I also assume when I was talking about all of this, that, that the future is bright. We will do this, we will do that, LLMs this, LLMs that. But there's a dark side to it. There's like a really big dark side, and probably not the place where you expect. And it's not about the technology. It's about what is going on around this. And unfortunately, we have sort of similar things in the past in our community, but right now in the whole development, like all developers are, exposed to a lot of like fear, uncertainty, and doubts around what they do, about the technology, and they are certain and lost, even though the things that that we can build are really promising. And I was there last year, like the latter part of last year. I was quite close to breaking, saying I don't want to be a developer anymore. I don't want to do with IT, because the world is so strange, and especially that it was correlated with a lot of attacks on Scala. And I have a really deep relationship with Scala, and I figured out, okay, I'm done. But I managed to pull off. But to be honest, even at this very conference, I spoke to some people, and I see the same in their eyes, and they even told me that they feel the same. So there is the dark side of the AI, things like this, the Devil Junior developers. I don't know if you read that blog. It's less catchy than its title, but yeah, there are things like this. Or this. Basically, I mean, but what is highlighted is that LLMs, and if you read that paper, it says that LLMs, even though sometimes they are not like force or ask, they prefer Python too much. What does it mean for Scala? Is it the end for Scala? And should we do all of this amazing stuff? Or should we just drop and work on our prompts and write Golang or whatever? No, don't. Please, don't. Don't. Because there is also studies like this. It's like quite interesting. I don't know how, if it shows the reality, but it shows that, open source developers were asked with working tasks with AI, they think they were even like 40% more productive. the output, observed measure was 20% less productive. Whatever productivity means for you. I'm not saying that this is the case for everybody, because yeah, I see cases where I believe that people were much more productive, but also what we feel, and if that's our measure, we might lie to ourselves. So there are bright sides. And last Scala, I was showing this demo. This is like last Scala, so like a few months ago. It's like the first live when we're showing like bright new, like even not merged with mainstream support for MCP in metals. So basically, so the models can interact with the Scala code. And where we start working on this work, a bit of desperate, because like back then we see a lot of this trend about LMs and how good they are, but it was not working with Scala. So if you got, okay, let's give it whatever we know you can, let's give it all the things that compiler knows, and it's still there, and you can use it, and it's productive. But right now, LM just works with Scala. I spoke with so many of you here at this very conference that has really positive things, so we don't need to worry about that. And there's few things about Scala that this might be really, relevant and important for the LLMs. And I think most of the things is actually in this sentence. That Scala developers loves to code. And I'm actually, a bit exaggerating and simplifying, but it's the easier way to speak. What I should say here is like, Scala developers in general tend to love coding a little bit more than the rest of the programming community. But let me ask you a question. Who here don't love to code in Scala? Or, sorry, let's put it this way. Who loves to code with Scala? And let me show you what kind of challenges it brings. So the first one is about, I mentioned the code reviews and the quality. Because loving to code is not that we love to type and see errors on the screen, but we love to look at beautiful things that make sense, that compose. I mean, I don't know, I don't see any other language that's just such well designed in terms of how things compose with each other and make sense. So yeah, that's what actually, what attracts me to Scala. But this leads us to the problem that we also think like this about beautifulness in our code. And is it a bad thing? Probably not. But another story, another developer from my team, and I change my thinking. I'm not thinking about LLMs as something that must happen. I'm thinking about a technology, a tool that might help, and usually helping. So I convinced somebody, hey, give it a go in your project. Like you got like this access. I don't remember what was it back then. And after a week, I'm checking out about like how do you like it, how it goes, and he's like, brings the code, it's fast, it compiles, it's even correct, but I don't like it. Why? It's like, I will show you. And he's showing me the code, and yeah, I mean, my Scala programmer in me is like, no, this is not the kind of code I can accept. And the good thing about not being a programmer is that there's sort of a second brain in my head now in managing, and everything is like, wait, this looks really similar. We were migrating this big, Java or Python monorepo or whatever, and I see the same code in production all over the place. I mean, this code is okay. It doesn't introduce any kind of, strange bugs. It's just the ifs are sort of, not right. You can take this statement and put it back there, and it will like save 2 lines, and it will not repeat like too close to a method. It will be. In the end, it actually makes no difference for actual application. But we have something like this in us. And this, it's us. But it's actually why we sometimes don't like LLMs. Because they produce code that is okay sometimes, but usually it's not nice. And I'm also like, looking for this, like I'm running like both of my teams is like around 90 people. So I have multiple people to observe and see. And what I'm trying to look is like a patterns about like which people, what is kind of common that use LLMs correctly, use LLMs well. Unfortunately, the most obvious thing is all of those people are like quite experienced and really good developers without LLMs, which is a bit sad because what we should care is like really not to make our best people 10 times better, but to make whole team 5 times better. That will bring much more value in every aspect. But the second thing I notice is that all of those people either don't care about this likeness of the code, or they accept the fact that this piece of the system might be ugly. And this is actually what helps them, among many things, to actually be successful. So yeah, as a community, we probably sometimes should accept that some of our code that we don't care that much, is like integration test, or I don't know, some not important part of our library or something, can have like lower quality. Not be incorrect, but some code repetition, something that is not, right, or even, don't say to people that are functional, a variable somewhere. And there's second thing about this, even more obvious when you look at this sentence. Scala developers love to code. And we, in terms of like LLMs and productivity and AI, we are mostly talking about code, about coding. So we are asking them, hey, please give up the thing that you love so much to be more productive. And I get the feeling that this is one of the main barriers. And what I can say, what I can advise you here. You remember when I was talking about things that influence the productivity and everything, that the programming and what I'll be talking about is not, the core things. There are other things that influence it even more. Like, requirements, meetings, communication, stuff like that. Things in life always have like two sides. And there's a positive side to that. Because we don't need to improve coding to be much more productive. You can code still manually. But if we use these things, LLMs, whatever the next technology will be, to improve the things that we don't like, writing documentation, we might even have much better results. And I don't know if you, maybe your peers, are not convinced because, Scala devs love to code, ask them, like, automate the things that you hate. And then, people get, somehow they know the tools, they understand the tools better, and they get their own ways to actually, start to use LLMs on things that should not work. And actually, this is what really makes me, happy, is I try to push, maybe not push, direct, ask people to use this kind of stuff, to experiment. And when I see they find their own ways around this and are much more happier, still code, but this piece, I don't like this. I actually don't like coding this piece. It's doing LLMs. That's actually what brings me a lot of joy. Because in the end, everybody wins. They are more happy, we get more code, and we can move to build more stuff. By the way, I think I should say I steal the Scala Love logo. It was an amazing conference. Borrowed. Yeah, I don't want to sound like a Rust advocate or something. And yeah, about moving on back maybe more to not the community and the feelings, but to the language. Do you know what that is? Do you know all the tools here? I don't know if all of them exist because I just asked ChatGPT to give me how many linters of Python and Golang that are. And why I'm showing you this? Because a few days ago we have a roundtable around AI, and I was expecting that I will need to preach something similar to this, like, you can do this. But the group that we have was old hardcore AI users, really nice ideas and everything. So I was learning all the time, which is sad because it's the same as developer experience. People that talks and improve developer experience are usually the people that has the best developer experience ever, and they just, cut the corners and optimize margins rather than people that have terrible developer experience. But we agree on many things there, and one of the things that nobody protested was, like, if you are working with LLMs and you want to be productive, you need to turn on everything that checks your code, every linter, and I'm talking even like turning on types in Python. And this is actually things that give me also hope, because all of these things, most of these things are built in the compiler and the types. So we're founded to actually go. And this is the kind of talk of the presentation when before I was talking about my observations, now I will talk about my beliefs. So I don't have any proofs or anything about what I'm going to say next, but I find Scala as a beautiful, safe, and convenient language. You can put so much information, so much code into one single line. Maybe that's not good, but let's say 5 single lines. And you got so much type safety. But if you step back and think about what we are doing right now, or like what those guys doing this kind of 10x development are doing. They don't use a programming language as a programming language. They use it as assembly pretty much, because the language they are vibing is English, a language, less formal than any programming language. And so we are like, imagine that we do this kind of simple thought experiment, that rather than LLMs, we are talking about, let's say, Lisp compiler, and rather than code, we are talking about binary or like assembly language. So right now what we do is basically program in COBOL or Lisp or whatever, but we put into our source repository assembly language. Because, you know, what are written and what we are dealing with is not what we actually express our thoughts in. So I get the feeling that that this, like the programming language we need to improve, that we need to have even higher level languages. That most likely needs to be safe, needs to be simple. I don't know if beautiful will be like, you know, what we would like to have, but, you know, it's always good to be a beautiful in terms of what you do. And this leads me to like, okay, so what will happen with Scala? Is Scala next generation language? I don't think it is. But it's not the punchline, it's not the end. If you think about that, you know, let's say like last year, somebody asked me about like, you know, is a capture calculus a good thing for the language? I don't know what I would answer, but for sure it would be not yes for sure. Now I'm leaning towards yes for sure. Why am I so certain? Because if you think about types and even DSLs, the biggest problems in them is actually not reading them, but writing them. And not actually, you know, writing, but trying to iron out the bugs. You know, there is a type, huge type. You see this probably like, you know, 5 lines of type. Like this 5 line of types doesn't match the other 5 line of types. And it's precise. It's usually the compilation error are super precise, even too precise for humans. But you know what is quite good with such things? With finding patterns and explaining patterns to something simple? LLMs. So I'm quite optimistic about all things there. And the level of safety that are built into the language. And Scala changed a lot. It's really convenient to use now. I mean, only 3 people raise their hands if they say like, you know, the compilation is slow. So I don't think that Scala will be the next generation language, but there is always something like a proto-language for a given generation. And I strongly believe that Scala might be this proto-language of the new era of LLM-based languages. Thank you. I think we have some time. Oh, this was quite fast.
Thank you. That's a great talk. Just a quick remark. Please don't degrade your Scala quality. Just to go faster, I just gave a talk about how Scala types, the quality of the Scala code that's well typed solves a lot of problems in LLM-generated code. However, I really like your idea about the compiler analogy. And I was wondering if you had any ideas about what structures in the natural language we need in order to have a sufficiently specific definition of what needs to be compiled towards Scala.
I fear I will have a question like this, because I don't know. And yeah, but to be honest, I was thinking a lot, like, should we be like, you know, more prescriptive, how we can evolve English. I hope there are smarter people that can figure it out. And about what you said, I don't ask anybody to write worse or less beautiful Scala code. All I ask is like, be open that the code something might generate for you might be a bit worse, and maybe somebody can write the library that will, you know, look at the code that work and is working and just refactor it to be nicer after the fact.
Thanks for your talk. I share your optimism. Do you have any thoughts or tips on how to distribute the benefits of LLMs like across a team or the skill levels in the team, or what have you experimented with there?
I mean, first thing, it sounds really bad, but sometimes you need to force people to use LLMs. But not like, this is ChatGPT, and you like, or we will mark all of the code that gets committed to the repository. If it's generated, then you hit your target and you are good. No, like this. Is what I mean, actually, you need to start with a task that makes sense only with LLMs. And it's forcing, because you force people, like, you cannot do this yourself, you need to do this. Or prepare a training on LLMs. And for some people, because like most people, like at least from what I see, they're reluctant. And they're not reluctant because they fear a technology, but they're reluctant because they don't see the value in what they are doing. Because especially in the brownfield projects, so projects that are, on the production, are quite a complex things, there is not obvious flows. It's quite easy, and there's, quite well even documented now in many places, how you deal with, like, let's build a to-do app with Python, with LLMs, or whatever else, just because there's like these flows that you split it into tasks, you talk about designs and everything. When you work with brownfield, it's not that simple. So a lot of people actually get bad experience and stop trying for 3 months. And the core thing that people need to learn is where to apply LLMs, then how to apply it, and then you can optimize things like, in this month, if you, treat like the thread sonnet that you will turn off the power, it works better, or next you need to, that's it, noise. It's basically where and how to split the work is like two common things. And most likely and I don't have a clear answer, we're still experimenting that. We have some flow, but it's mostly about like working around with like, new stuff, how to work with Scala. We did a training on this just before Scala days. And again, if you want to know more, talk to Tomek Godzik or Łukasz Biały, because they were doing it. I'm, one level up. But yeah, so this like sort of forcing, and there need to be a ton of like positive feedback. So people are even more motivated, because it's really frustrating at the very beginning when you spend 3 hours and you get nothing. And if I know actually how to do this 5x, I would have my own jet now.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much. I hope I don't bore you to death, and please remember Scala is beautiful.